gentlemen, may I now commence the program. Warmly welcome to our 8th episode Asian Region Dialogues panel discussion. My name is Kim Liang, a junior researcher for Center for Sustainable Development Study of Asian Region Institute. This is my great pleasure to be a moderator for today's program. Today, our AVI-SDG Dialogues have brought an 8th topic of our webinar series on biodiversity conservation and sustainable development to the floor discussion. And we would like to deeply interest in what are the progress, challenge in achieving biodiversity conservation for sustainable development of SDG, and what are the key interventions being implemented to support biodiversity conservation amid the COVID-19 pandemics, and what are the proposed short-term intervention and long-term strategy for supporting biodiversity conservation. And the last is what the role of should multi-stakeholder and publics play to support the progress. Excellency, honorable speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In this meantime, we are honored to have our permanent leader, researcher in our diverse development field, who will deliver their valuable comment in our program today. Before starting our program, please allow me to introduce our honorable speaker who are waiting on the screen to share their presentation and comment. So first of all, please allow me to introduce Her Excellency Dr. Chan Sokmali, the Under Secretary of State from Ministry of Environment, who was in charge of biodiversity and ecosystem, as well as natural resources in Cambodia. In addition, Her Excellency is the alternative focal point of the UNCBD and the alternative GEF Council member representing East Asia region, as well as the focal point of a number of other protocol and multi-environmental agreement. Her Excellency holds a PhD degree in natural resource management, biodiversity conservation, and environmental protection. She also extensive experience and knowledge on leadership coordination, development, and innovation of legal structure, policy projects on Undp national report to the UNCBD and sustainable development on relevant to the natural resource, ecosystem, biodiversity, and environment at the national, regional, and international level. Second, please give a warm welcome to our honorable speaker, Mr. Seng Tip, the country director of WWF Cambodia. He assumed in the position in 1st July 2017. Prior to this, he was a regional conservation director of WWF Greater Mekong. And before that, he was a regional director of Western Pacific's WWF Australia, where he overviewed to the WWF country official, which are the Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. And he has 20-year experience in the field of environment and conservation in Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific region. Over the past 15 years, he have been in managing stream and work at both country regional level and in both capacity as the country director of the regional director. In addition, he during 2010 to 2014, he served as a member of the WWF International Conservation Committee, a WWF Global Network Decision-Making body of the Global Conservation Program, and he holds a master's degree in environment management from Yale University of USA, and he have award as the Russell E. Trent Conservation Leader in 2002. And for the last speaker, please give a big applause to our honorable speaker, Mr. Soni, policy specialist on NRM, biodiversity and environmental from UNDP. And he worked for UNDP since 2018. His professional experience include policy and project development, natural resource and biodiversity management, sustainable financing, protecting areas management, including the payment for ecosystem service and the biodiversity financing solution in Cambodia, circular economic and educational program for environment and climate change. Before joining UNDP, he managed the complex conservation and development program to sustain the Cardamom Mountain and the northeastern landscape with the international NGO such as Fauna and Flora International and Undp exchange program for over 15 years. His educational background includes a master's degree in biodiverse conservation from the Royal University of Phnom Penh and a master's degree in development study from University of Melbourne, Australia, and the bachelor degree in business management. Excellency, honorable speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. To follow our agenda today, we will start our captivating program with the first agenda on the role of UNDP for biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. Second, the role of WWS biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. And the third will be on government policy intervention for biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. And for the last of our agenda, we will open for the joint discussion. Then we will have a group photo section with our honorable speaker at the end of our program. So, Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to have any question during our presentation periods, please drop your question in our Zoom chat box or our Facebook Live. And so now, to begin our program, please allow me to invite our honorable speaker from UNDP in Cambodia, Mr. Soni, to deliver his speech. Mr. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kim Biang, and good afternoon, Excellency Dr. Chan Somali, and the Secretary of State of Ministry of Environment, Mr. Saint Thiet, Director of WWF. Allow me to share the screen. Just wait a second. Can you see my screen? Yeah, is it okay now? Can I proceed? Okay. Thank you. Once again for the AVI for this opportunity to allow me to share the some of the experience that UNDP have been doing and supporting the Ministry of Environment as well. And so I think I don't have to to introduce myself because our organizer had already introduced my bio already. So let me begin with the presentation.
Sonny, can you put it in the presentation mode, please?
Is it still in? Not.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me stop sharing again. One more time. Oh, okay, here. Is it working now?
It's not come out yet on my screen. Maybe other. Kim Liang.
Kim Liang, is it okay now or not? Not yet.
Oh, not yet.
Let me try one more time, and maybe just I have to project it first as a full screen, and then I try to come to share the screen later on. There's something wrong with my machine. Okay. How is that now?
Yes.
I see it now.
Okay. See the note, so to see just this full screen. Okay. Thank you. Sorry for that. Let me begin with the presentation because my presentation will cover 4 main points associated by the AVI team. The first point is related to progress that UNP works in partnership with the Ministry of Environment, especially Excellency Somali. She knows very well on this one. The second is to discuss more on key issues and challenges that we faced. And following that, I will share some key interventions that Undp have to respond to those challenges. And finally, I will conclude my talk with some key consideration. So before I start with sharing the progress that Undp work in partnership with the Ministry of Environment, I would like to highlight a few points in terms of biodiversity and ecosystems and the features predominantly across many other sustainable development goals and associated targets, as you may know. So they contribute to human well-being, development priorities. So biodiversity is at the center of many economic activities and supporting, especially in the agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. And as you may have noticed, that nearly half of human population is directly dependent on natural resources for their livelihood, and many of them are directly dependent on biodiversity and fulfill their daily subsistence needs. And Cambodia has made a significant progress, especially, the government had took a major step in natural resource reform, so have led to dramatic increase of particular system from 3 to 7.5 million hectares. So this is very good news, and those particular system and biodiversity conservation corridor are home to many globally endangered species. Now, let's look at what have Undp and supporting in partnership with the MOE. Here are some key results that I would like to highlight. For example, like the development of action and investment plan for REDD+, and the national nested system for REDD+ have been drafted and support the government to develop the 10-year management plan of Phnom Kalen National Park. And some of the key UNDP global initiative, especially in the partnership and especially in the leadership from Excellency Somali, to review some of the assessments such as policy institutional review, biodiversity expenditure review, financial need assessments that based on the 24 theme of the NBSAP. And finally, that contribute to the development of the part of its finance plan of Cambodia. And together with UNDP, 2 PESI have been piloting in Phnom Kalen and Kapachai in the objective, in the aim of protecting the ecosystems and watershed of the area. And there are a number of assessments in terms of watersheds, water availability and land use changes in 2 sites. We contribute to the development of the draft national PS roadmap in the next 10 years. And this document has been reviewed, and especially under the review of technical working group on biodiversity. There are some recent assessment as well, and that support the Ministry of Environment under the new initiative, which is known as the Cambodia Sustainable Landscape and Ecotourism Project. A review of sustainable financing options and ecosystem economic evaluations have been done. And of course, under the review at the moment, from the technical officers under the Ministry of Environment. Despite the vast protected areas that Cambodia have made a lot of significant progress, I just presented above, Cambodia has faced many challenges, which I highlighted below here. What is related to is insufficient human resources in guarding those vast protected areas. Let's imagine that MOE has to protect 41% of the total land, with the limit number of rangers. If I'm not mistaken, it's around 1,250 rangers. So if I would like to put this into context, one ranger is supposed to manage over 5,000 hectares of protected areas, which is not impossible to make an effective management, right? And linking to that, Ministry of Environment still have limited budget. Under the Biodiversity Expenditure Review, we know that the national budget in 2018, the national budget allocation allocated to Ministry of Environment is less than 1% compared to the total budget, which is quite minimal to protect the vast protected area systems. So we need more sustainable financing options. But the challenge that the country faces is the lack of circular projects or businesses to tackle a growing of waste, solid waste especially, which can lead to climate change effects and polluting the river systems and marine ecosystem as well, for example, like the plastic pollution. As you know, that many other Cambodian populations are living in the rural areas, and most of them are dependent greatly on biomass of fossil fuels. Biomass and wood fields. So field wood. So this for energy and lighting and so on. So that can lead to forest degradation and deforestation, if at a larger scale as well. Of course, there are commitments from the government and to do more integrated community land use planning, but at a large scale or a landscape level, there's still limited integrated natural resources and land use planning and management. To respond to those challenges, the Undp has focused on two main lines of interventions. That include both short-term and long-term action, with the objective to harness nature power to accelerate the progress toward achieving sustainable biodiversity and climate goal, and a broader sense SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. The first programmatic areas is focusing on the investment in nature and inclusive nature-based solutions. To highlight a few actions below here, as you may see in the slide. So exploring sustainable financing mechanism for biodiversity and protected area to positively impact environmental progress and the resilience of people against the future shocks. Continue to provide technical and policy support to government partners, and to ensure that pro and nature positive measures are structurally incorporated in the new post-COVID economic structures. So we have Undp is focusing on post-COVID recovery as well. So continue to support the government in strengthening public finance. I think some of the example I highlighted about in terms of biodiversity expenditure review. One of the financing solutions is to support and strengthen public finance budgeting or reallocation of the budget towards incentivizing clean, circular and nature regenerative production and consumption. Continue to support the development of Green New Deals which could provide a strong basis on which to rebuild more sustainably, especially to support the green recovery. You know, some of the activity have been done under the previous project. I can see in the example, in the picture here, for example, like forest restoration, tree planting as a COVID response, regenerating or biodiversity-friendly agriculture, sustainable forest management under the REDD+ project, for example. And continue to support and work with government partners to ensure that stimulus packages reach individuals whose jobs and livelihoods are severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Tree planting is one example, but in the future we continue to support this and we hope to create more green and nature supporting jobs, more jobs in the future. This year, I think around 200,000 individuals have been benefiting from this COVID response activities. And the second line of UNDP interventions focuses on the preventing future zoonotic disease outbreaks and reducing their impact through a holistic approach to conserving nature. Those interventions include implementing conservation measures to address natural environment, environmental change, habitat loss, including deforestation and wildlife trade, etc. Deepening resilience of communities and vulnerable groups to zoonotic diseases, including climate impacts and related economic and societal shocks, through a range of nature-based solutions, which I highlighted about, including tree planting, REDD+ and BEF and so on. Support increasing this to support the sustainable farming by improving key policies, secure value change of key commodities and food crops. I think you can see some of the small but very innovative initiative that UNDP have been supporting the DGIS, Ministry of Environment, for mapping nature for people and the planet. It's one of the classic examples that I could highlight, which contribute to support another point that incorporating human and planetary health lens consideration. So by taking into account the connection or interconnection between sustainable development planning, health, public health systems, and agricultural planning. So this is the concluding slide, but to achieve the biodiversity conservation and sustainable development outcomes, multi-stakeholders governance in natural resource management, biodiversity conservation is the key. And why is it so? Because some of the public and multi-stakeholders play very important roles in implementing nature-based solutions and market-based mechanism, for example, like REDD+ projects and the pilot PES project, for example. Continue to support the government, and in this case, the government agencies should create an enabling environment for multi-stakeholder governance systems and support the environmental policies measures that foster public and private investment for nature positive projects. Equally important, civil society organization, youth groups, individuals, and indigenous people have roles and responsibilities to participate in natural resource management and biodiversity conservation, and ensure their access rights for sustainable use of natural resources where their livelihoods depend upon. But that's another important that links to the sustainable financing as well. It's about the equitable access to benefit sharing for conservation and development projects to be enhanced. There's a lot of commitments and a lot of initiatives have been done, including REDD projects. Benefit sharing should be ensured, mechanism should be ensured for other innovative financing options. Lastly, it's talking about the partnership building, because it's important. Without finance, you cannot do much for conservation, biodiversity conservation, and sustainable development. So partnership building will help to foster and accelerate resource mobilization, and leveraging private finance through private sector play a really important role in terms of sustainable financing mechanism that support the biodiversity outcomes and sustainable development projects. I would like to pass my presentation from here, and I would like welcome questions or comments at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soni, and for your insightful and valuable remarks. And the second, I would like to invite our honorable speaker from the WWF in Cambodia, Mr. Saintiet, to convey his remark. Mr. Please, the floor is yours.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful, that's good. Hang on, I need to push this cursor back. All right, first of all, thank you very much for giving the opportunity to me as the director of WF Cambodia. And first of all, I like to respect to Her Excellency Chan Somali, Under Secretary of State, Ministry of Environment, and Soni, and the guest speaker in this forums. My talk is around the biodiversity, role of WF, biodiversity conservation and sustainable development through an integrated landscape approach. This kind of focusing on the integrated landscape approach. So I will provide an overview of the current challenges facing conservation today. And I will touch base on why traditional conservation approach is not longer viable. I will give some specific example that WF and other partner has initiated an approach aiming to address a balance between the economic development and conservation in the stakeholder landscapes. It is more about an integrated landscape approach that is inclusive of a multi-stakeholder, both public and private, as well as the government and the conservation communities. That around my if you look back, I trying to bring you a history a bit. 60 years ago, Cambodia was considered as to be one of the great game lands of the world. You know, a game land is animals, basically talking about. It's a second only to African game lands. That described by Charles Wooten, who came to Cambodia during the 1951. He did the survey in Cambodia, and he described Cambodia like what it's called the safari of Asia. So because it's a full of animal in our landscapes there during that time. So if you look at that and that Cambodia program in Cambodia, these are the two unique and biodiversity rich landscapes where we describe it in here is the Eastern Plain landscape. It cover more light greens over there. And then the yellow part is the Mekong flooded forest landscapes. These are priority landscape for WF Cambodia. And if you look closely into this a bit, and the Eastern Plain landscape where Mundulkiri, Ratanakiri are covered, it remained the largest block of the dry forest ecoregion we are described as one of the unique habitat and in the Southeast Asia or in the world. It covering right now is still relatively intact, more than 5,000 kilometers square. It's as an intact forest. And this landscape are hosting indigenous populations. In Mundulkiri particular, is more than 49% of the population are minorities there. And it hosts the endangered species. It's a banting. You can see it look like cow, but it's a wild animals. And 60% of the global population, Eastern Plain landscape hosted this this population. And this landscape also hosted the elephants population. Is more than 3,300 individuals, which is a viable population. And it also home to the sick cat species. If you want to know what sick cat species are, leopard, clouded leopard, golden cat, marble cat, jungle cat, and fishing cat. So these are the animals are critically endangered in the world. And it's important that this landscape are habitated for those still. And importantly, you can see a lot of new hits on the Sami crocodile discovery recently by the Ministry of Environment and WWF. So this river in the Striped Oak are having more or less around 10 adult individuals in a very healthy population in the river, and also supporting a critical endangers of giant ibis, white-shouldered ibis, and other species as well. In the Mekong flooded areas, it's very important. You know, you look at the Mekong entire, it's a 4,000 kilometers long from China down to the delta in Vietnam, a piece of 40 or 50 kilometers long in Cambodia between Crotches and Seng Trang. It's the higher biodiversity hotspots and an intact habitat in there. It supports critically endangered species of the river dolphins. It have more than 90 individuals in there. It's also supporting a critical endangered species such as the bird like that. You can see it river terns. We are hosting there around 95% of the global population, which is a lot. And we should be proud of that one. Recently also discovered the critical endangered species of hawk deer. You can see we estimate around less than 50 individuals out there, population are viable. And in the river, we're supporting a lot of giant species like giant barbs, like this, giant catfish, giant stingray, giant shell turtle. All the giant species are on the Mekong, and also support, importantly, the world largest inland fishery for Cambodia port. It is important, impressive landscape in the Mekong. So recently we have launched the global population survey report, which is the effort between Ministry of Environment and WWF on the Angulate survey. And these are a public release of our effort over the past 10 years, where WWF and the Ministry of Environment have monitoring how the species are like, their status. And as a result, in this report, it have indicated an alarming situations that the 72% of banting population are decreased over the past 10 years. The decrease of animals is not only Cambodia, but it's throughout the Southeast Asia. And 52% of the red muntjac also declined, and 18% of wild boar are also declining in that particular report highlighted. An important camera trap survey, a population of cat species like leopards are declining by 83%, declining as well in this two protected area that we are closely monitoring. Other species also declining concerning the does, the Asian wild dog, and the jungle cat, sun bear, and buntering as well, that we closely monitor this population as a result like that. So the reason why these species are declining, this is what we call crisis in terms of the poaching and snaring. If you look at this number based on our database and the field assessments in there, it basically snaring is one of the major issues. it encountered more than 100 folds, particular the lethal snare. It's been increased and in particular 0.04 snares per 100 square to per 100 kilometer of patrol. So that snaring has become more an issue. And then, as you can see, ranger working hard, removing snare. It's thousands of snare, but this is a report over the past 10 years. And WWF have also releasing a crisis, snaring crisis in Southeast Asia as well. So Cambodia was part of that report. This is one of the 2 protected areas that we monitor closely of snare removing. And hunting, gun, dogs are still remain as challenging. And the domestic dogs, particularly roaming around in the forest, which contributing a lot of issues on disease spread and other things as well. So in addition to that, other aspects where it's challenging concerning the infrastructure development, access, road constructions, and forest conversion. And these are the challenges we face. And as you can see, also important aspect that how this snaring crisis contributing to human aspects, health aspects. So snaring is not only just empty the wildlife there, but it's empty the forest syndromes. Not only biodiversity, but also a negative impact on ecosystems. Example, seed dispersal, ecosystems engineering, and nutrients distribution. It carried by animals. If there is no animal in there, this kind of ecosystem service is going to be lost. And importantly, it's impacting on the public health, particularly based on a lot of studies that are available on the websites. It's a 58% of identified humans pathogens, which is 60 to 73% emerging infectious disease are coming from a zoonotic, original from animals, basically. And snaring in the wildlife trade bring wildlife into a closer contact with humans, increasing the risk of zoonotic spillovers. And you can see the chart here, how they slaughter the animal. This is come to the closer of zoonotic disease that could happen easily. And how this zoonotic spread is in the cartoon here, explaining easily to understand. So on the other threat is, as you know, the Mekong is one of the river that's rich in the world, but it's under a lot of threat. You can see a cascading dam constructed, and thanks to the government of Cambodia who say no to the 2 dams on the Mekong main stem in Stung Treng and Sambo, which is set an example of the leaderships in terms of get rid of the large infrastructure that are causing a problem with riverine systems. However, the upstream dam is still continue to be constructed, which is bringing a lot of worry to the biodiversity, to the livelihood of the people, and the food security for the people. Gill net aspect, electrofishing on the river, forest conversions, land grabbing, these are the areas still need to be addressed under the conservations. As a bigger pictures, WWF recognize the current of working is not efficient and to deliver conservation impact at scale. And conservationists certainly need to look outward kind of approach in order to incorporate all other solutions, all other development aspects, and recognize and tackling the social economic issues, engaging with stakeholder sectors. This is a very important aspect that conservation is not for biodiversity conservation per se, but it is looking into how do we incorporate other development and economic development as well. Integrated landscape approach will be help us to look outside of the conservation box, that what I'm going to say, and can achieve the multiple results as well under the current challenging what we are facing. One of the key indicators that what integrated landscape approach is to share understanding the stakeholder need to understand what resources available they have in the landscape, and what the view on that one. How do they plan? How do they manage those resources that are available? Because degrading that resources will impact their long-term business as well. So when we're talking about the landscapes, and we need to understand what is the landscapes. So landscape can be a two meaning of here. It's a biodiversity landscape versus a stakeholder landscape. In this context, I'm going to talk about the stakeholder landscapes. So biodiversity landscape is more talking about the wildlife movement, wildlife ecosystem services, dispersal services, riverine ecological processes. But in this particular landscape that I like to talk is around stakeholder landscape, where people are in there. So an area where delineated by stakeholder for a specific set of common objectives, okay? That will be influenced by entity, including human interaction, according to the rules, basically. So when you understand the stakeholder landscape, these are stakeholders will influence, and whatever shape they would like to do within the landscape, the power with them right now. They have the money, they have the power to shape this landscape for the future. So therefore, this is very, very important for WWF and other conservation need to look into this kind of a stakeholder landscape approach in order to make sure the landscape are more sustainable and for conservation and for development in the future as well. So what we look like in here, it means that when talking about stakeholder landscape conservation, an approach for conservation and development, we need to understand what the success look like. So these are success look like in terms of building the coalition, building the partnership, and building the platform where stakeholder can take a role and responsibility ensuring the sustainability in the landscape. So the 5 key elements that need to do in the landscape approach is one, to ensure the multi-stakeholder platform are in place, bring the right people in this platform, and build understanding and share understanding what resources in the landscapes, and doing a collaborative planning together, and then implemented that planning, and then do a monitoring for adaptive management and accountability. Those are people in the landscape. Important thing are catalysts. Catalyst is important because it's influenced by the external, particularly from the markets and from the governance and from the finance aspects. Finance means that the investment in this regard. So these are the important steps and processes and the key indicators. You can see it. How do we define the success for implementing the landscape approach? It's very important to understand this process. This is, I'm talking about no longer biodiversity conservation as an approach, traditional way that we are doing, but we need to look into this inclusive partnership approach in that landscape. I bring some example of what we have done with the government ministry and supporting the provincial government. This kind of landscape approach is the way forward and for our conservation and development sustainably. So setting up the governance structure, you can see this is a specific example that I would like to highlight for this particular what we are talking about. This is kind of in Mondulkiri province where we established the governance of the multi-stakeholder landscape management aspects, where WWF is in here and other experts is in here, and it managed by the provincial government office. And you can see a multiple stakeholder landscape platform that we initiated and have their voice heard, and also listen to what should be done in the landscapes. There are a ton of data that need to be included in the process of defining a special plan or landscape plan. These are information for your information that what we have done, and there are a ton of information is needed it around physical environment, it's around physical infrastructure, it's around land use currently they use, what the future they use, and the population and settlements, social infrastructure, and then economic aspects. So there's a ton of information that need to put it in, analyzing and producing what the future lands use would be, and what current and past landscape are used, land use. This building on sharing understanding, you can see when you overlay all of this thing into the one map. For your information, this is Mondulkiri provinces that we are focusing in here. This is a kind of infrastructure, existing infrastructure, and what future are planning for infrastructure. And these are the existing land use systems in here, where protected area are, and where the other land use based on these legends, and we put together on the map. And then we go through a series of consultation processes with commune, with district, with other NGO, with company, in order to understand what they use their land and verifies those land use aspects. Where conflict emerge, we need to address it right away. These are also collaborative planning and stakeholder consultation over the wildlife movement. We do understand development is important. If we are not looked after carefully on where the wildlife are moved, biodiversity corridors aspect need to conserve. When road it come, how do we address to allow wildlife survive for the future as well? So therefore, we're looking at movement of the wildlife in one area to another and plan it on the map, and to see easily how these land are connected, biodiversity are connected, development can go forward, plus leaving some of the area for wildlife and biodiversity as well. So it's also looking into where it's a possible, extractive industries that currently under the license, and we look into how do we manage that and put it into the land use plan process. And also looking at where the urbanization, tourist development aspects. So we can see at Mondulkiri, and we mapping together with the provincial authority and other stakeholders as well. So this is agricultural development land. We're looking into the existing, and also we're planning where the future is going to expand it for agricultural land development as well. So you can see this overlay everything based on the stakeholder interest in the landscapes. And then looking at what is the road network plan under the current and under the future scenario as well. So where those roads are cut to the key protected area and the core area of wildlife sanctuary and biodiversity. And also, this also looking into urbanization. We know that Mondulkiri is gonna expand it, and where are the areas to expand it? We're looking in designing in a lot of scenario of that one as well. So in overall look at the economic aspect, if we are moving to a conservative approach, which is more conservation, of course, the forest in Mondulkiri gonna remain 85%. But if we are doing more, let things go like business as usual at currently, and the forest in the future by 2040, the forest is gonna be left around 34%. So otherwise, the other option with compromise the option with a green economy scenario where we do development, we also conserve specific area as well, looking at connectivity of biodiversity, we be able to move, and the forest in the next 20 years, it can be left around 52% scenario. More or less, provincial authority are agreed to go into the green economy scenario under the scenario that we come up with in this chart. So then we come up with the collaborative planning and action plan. You can see the 5 pillars where the stakeholder come up with, and NOM protection is the key, cultural protection, ecotourism development, sustainable agriculture development, regional economic integration, and the natural-based urbanization development as well. So these are the 5 pillars under the action plan and from the land use plan that we developed together with the provincial authority and it's signed it off already, recognized by the Ministry of Land Use, land management aspects. And it's very, very important to set the long-term vision, how the landscape it look like. So in a nutshell, these are supposed to be an approach of the landscapes that I'm talking about. Conservation should be part of all the other sustainable development, including forest management, including mining, including river stewardships, and sustainable protection of the financing aspect. So if by doing these things, which is a conservation approach, need to look into step out a little bit from our comfort zone or biodiversity approach or traditional conservation approach, we be able to deliver sustainable development and conservation approach and conservation of the species as well. This is what the approach that I like to highlight for this talk. Over, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. for your insightful and valuable remarks. So next, I would like to turn the floor for Honorable Speaker from Ministry of Environment, Her Excellency Dr. Chang Sumali, to deliver her remark. Her Excellency, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kim Len. Is I not wrong pronounce your name?
Yes.
First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank to the ASEAN Vision Institute that provide the opportunity for me to share some experience regarding to sustainable biodiversity or biodiversity conservation in Cambodia. For me, today I apologize that I don't have a slide presentation in English. My colleague have sharing the Khmer slide, but I think it's better for me to speak directly without slides, you don't mind. And especially after listen to the two presenters, to the two panelists, he already mentioned and captured almost of the activity in the ground, and as well as some important approach that already is mentioned here. And also it is a challenge for me as well, as after my speaker followed by Mr. Sentiet, because Sentiet he's captured very well on what that WWF has been done in Cambodia in cooperation with the government, and as well as some issue that the government already mentioned, and we did is already mentioned by Mr. Soni earlier in the first presentation already. So for me, I will highlight only some policy that Cambodia have been developed and implemented so far up to now, and some in the innovative. I highlight on the key important area in this part. Then I will go maybe jump directly to the challenge or opportunity for Cambodia, especially for the government of Cambodia regarding to the biodiversity conservation. Okay, let me begin with the national policy. I think Cambodia is the one country that we consider as the hotspot biodiversity, as a previous speaker already mentioned. So we also become a party of the CBD conventions in the 1995, not only the CBD convention, but also the 3 Rio Convention, including UN HRPC and the UNCCD as well. So in the obligation as the party, as well as on behalf of the country, that we have the obligation to develop some legislation and policy to manage our natural resources in Cambodia. So we come up with the institution. We have institution, a very strong institution. The 2 articles of our institution covers the national asset that the institution number 58 and also the institution number 59 is talking about the obligation of the Cambodia to conserve and to protect our national asset, including natural resources. This is what that we have a reference for us to develop our national legislation so far. So regarding to the law and regulation, we have a number of law, but I can highlight that the most important law that we apply right now is the law on the protected area, forestry policy, forestry law, fishery policy, fishery law, and also the land law, also very important for us as well. Recently, we are also in line with the other institutions. We start to conduct or develop the draft environmental code. This is the first code for Cambodia. However, the draft is still not finished, but we hope that we can finish within this mandate of the government. Moreover, in recently, we also draft the sub-degree, we call the sub-degree on access and benefit sharing. This is quite new for all Cambodian people as well as for our country. But when this sub-degree become into force, we hope that contribute a lot to the biodiversity conservation as well as to get the benefit for the local people and for the Cambodian people to contribute in the social economic development in the country. Let me move to the strategy. Move to the strategy that we have conducted so far. I may focus only on the one strategy we call NBSAP. I think all of us are familiar with the terminology of the NBSAP that stands for the National Biodiversity Strategic and Action Plan. Right now we have the second version of the NBSAP that adopted in 1996 to contribute in the implementation of the global biodiversity strategic and action plan and achieve biodiversity target 2011-2020. So with this NBSAP, if you look at the NBSAP that we have published so far, we have 24 thematic areas. The most important thing that we developed on that time, we capture a lot of sustainable development, including sustainable land, sustainable forestry, sustainable fishery, and also sustainable agriculture as well. So if you look at that, those thematic areas, including the climate change that we include in this one, will contribute to the sustainable development goal that Cambodia is one of the UN countries that have the obligation to implement it. Moreover, we also convert and in line with the global sustainable development goal to develop our national development goal, especially to align with the goal 13 on climate change and the goal 14 species under water and goals 15 about the terrestrial species of the terrestrial protected area. So this is what that we in line and have connected from one to another policy, that we make sure all of our policy have the coherent, have the connectivity, and also to cover all the main aspects that to ensure our natural resource and biodiversity, especially ecosystem service, are well managed and provide the benefit to the Cambodian people. This is just a brief for the policy and the regulation that we have so far in Cambodia. Now, the most important thing that I want to highlight here, we're not going to make the policy and the regulation on the paper. We have the strategic, and also we develop the implementation plan and action plan to implement of those policies. The most important thing right now, I don't want to repeat whatever that our colleague, previous speaker already talked, especially the implementation at the ground or the actual implementation that implemented by our partner and international organization, as well as the development partner. What that I would like to mention here, the implementation plan that the government would like to highlight is we want to conduct the implementation of our policy, national policy, in the like a holistic approach. The holistic approach is very important, because we don't want to go ad hoc like the previous time, and we divide the territory for individual partner or development partner to implement it all. So we come up with the strategic and also the holistic approach, and especially we have to thinking about the synergy approach among the partner, the synergy approach among the institution, to avoid two things. First, to avoid the overlapping of the mandate between one institution to another institution. The second is we have to save our resources, to use the effectively of our availability resource that we have in Cambodia. So this is the most important that the government of Cambodia right now thinking about this holistic approach, and especially under the leadership of the Minister of Environment, His Excellency Dr. Saisma. He is serious about look at the big picture rather than we look at the small picture and do as the ad hoc. The sustainability of the program, the sustainability of the project is the most important for the government. We don't want to see, you know, one project start to implement it. Of course, we got the output and we got the outcome, but after that, we don't have anything or any less in the country or for the continuing for our country of Cambodia. Our policy for the later on in the future, we're thinking about how we can help ourselves rather than we sit and waiting to seeking the financial support from other partners. This is the one approach that the government has to put and to keep as the priority, try to build our capacity, try to strengthen our institution, and also try to engage all the participation from all the relevant institutions, all the stakeholders, from the top level to the down level. So that means the indigenous, local people, private sector are all very important and the key stakeholders to contribute in the achievement of the sustainable development goal in Cambodia, especially for the biodiversity conservation in Cambodia as well. Based on this approach, you know, recently the government started to establish the national, we call the Orchid Conservation and Research Center. The Orchid Conservation and Research Center come up from the one project, the initiative project for the, we call the Sri Rio Convention project that we are partner with the Undp. We thinking like, okay, this is a attempt for the government to combine together, to implement together between the Sri Rio Convention. When I'm talking about the Sri Rio Convention, I refer to the Biodiversity Convention, the Land Degradation Convention, and the Climate Change Convention. So these three conventions have all connectivity and the activity a lot that we can align together. So that's why we established this center. Our initial idea is to synergy among these three conventions. How we synergy through this convention? With the main purpose of this center is we have four main purposes. One is for conservation, second is for research, scientific research. The third one is for education, communication, and the fourth one is for entertainment, recreation, and also income generation for the local people. So we're thinking, okay, biodiversity conservation alone is not going to be successful for the sustainable development. We need for the green development. So we need for the new renewable energy to take place. We need for the circular economy. And we also need for the we call the new approach for the sustainable agriculture to recover the land degradation in Cambodia. So that's why we established this center to call for all cooperation from all institutions, especially Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Agriculture. That is the main ministry that implement these three conventions. We hope a lot, from this center. It will give the space, give the gap for all the private sector that are be able to join with the government to implement, to make this center happen. And also we encourage all the research institutions in Cambodia to involve with us to conduct all the scientific research. That right now, the priority, one of among the priority that the government said at this moment is the scientific research for the species and identify the species. Why scientific research is so very important is you look at back to the Nagoya Protocol that we already ratified in 2015. That means whenever that the countries start to ratify the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing, we have to know what are the species and also the biodiversity in Cambodia that already existed before we going to start them to claim back the benefit that the other country or the other user country will access our genetic resources to conduct and these commercial purpose. So how can we make inventory of our natural resource if we don't know about the scientific, if we don't know about the species? So scientific and also the identification of the species are still remain important for us. That's why it's one of the priority we're going to focus on this scientific research as well. Participatory is also very important, as I mentioned earlier. We need all the key actors to involve with us, including the private sector. So how can we get involvement from all the private sector? We have to come up with some innovation mechanism. We start to develop our national policy on pest. I think Mr. Soni already mentioned earlier. We conduct 2 pilot phase for pests in Kawachai and in the Phnom Penh National Park. However, this pilot, we going to come up with what lesson learned from this pilot project and what is the challenge from this pilot project. Then we're going to develop the national strategic and the national policy on pest to make sure that we, the country, have enough financial for biodiversity conservation. If you look at the biofilm project that we already conduct so far, that means the gap for the biodiversity conservation from the assessment phase 1 that we conduct with UNDP, that means more than half of the budget that we need to ensure that our biodiversity well managed are missing. So where is those funding come from? So this is what that the government had to taking into account and had to thinking seriously. Where is the money have to mobilize for the conservation? So on that strategic, we thinking about two way approach. The one approach we had to mobilize from our resource like through the payment ecosystem service, through the RED Plus program that we already have it. Through the payment for ecosystem services, we start with the voluntary basis that we apply for the 2 pilot sites in Cambodia, and is be successful on that one. We going to come up with the policies, coherent policy for this PES. For the PES, for the RED Plus project, we quite well. The project well implemented. All those the carbon credit that we have the market so far is voluntary market, but this voluntary market give us like some money for us to start to contribute for the conservation as well. So the RED Plus project, you can see the livelihood of the local community has improved. The remote area that never have the clean water now start to have clean water. So when they have clean water, that means their life and their health become improved. When the health become improved, that means we have a good access for, you know, like maintain our health of the people and the human resource of the country. So it's we have a good healthy human resource, then development of the country will go along. We cannot, you know, like develop country without have enough human resource. This is very important that the government thinking in advance. Also, those kind of things is not quite directly to the biodiversity conservation, but it's the resource for contribute to the biodiversity conservation as well. That's why I said earlier, what the government look is in the holistic approach, in the long run approach, rather than look at the ad hoc and short term. This is just one thing. Another thing is livelihood development is also in innovation that we try to enhance step by step. We consider, like, you know, some aspect that we thinking is the people is the Cambodian people still hungry, that we cannot, you know, like make a successful for the biodiversity conservation or natural resource management, because they need food. They need timber, they need forest product for their livelihood to support their living. So we had to thinking the government policy had to come up with any approach that can improve local livelihood. When the local livelihood has been improved, that the pressure on the natural resource has been reduced as well. I think this approach is not new, but we still implement and continue implement and will implement in the future as well. Never stop this one. So the improvement of the local livelihood is very important and significant that contribute to the sustainable development goal that we set in the goal 14 and 15 and as well as the goal 13 as well. So now let me move to the opportunity. I think maybe I talk too much already. Yes, let me move to the opportunity. I'm not going to talk about the challenge. Our colleague previous time already mentioned it. I move to the opportunity. Look at what opportunity that we have. Why we still hope that we can conserve our natural resource. We want our natural resource go back to the first slide that Mr. Seng Tiet showed in the 60 years ago, that Cambodia used to be the second country after the Africa in terms of the natural resource. And we want to get enough financial for biodiversity. If we assess for the next year after that for the biofuel phase 2 or phase 3 and so on, we hope that the gap it become less and less. So what we going to do? So what is the capital that we have? So what is the basic foundation that we do hope we can make it in the future? I can say the most important thing is the peace and stability of the country. If you look at the peace and stability of the country, that is very important for country development. You look at some country in the Asian country, look at Myanmar. So Myanmar is supposed to be the country that have very beautiful country for the natural resources, for the biodiversity conservation. When the country has peace and stability, that means how many companies, how many development partners that go to Myanmar how many investors go to Myanmar for development. And but right now, when the country, have the challenge in terms of political issue, you can see from day to day, many investors start to withdraw. So if you don't have enough capacity in your country, so do you expect that the country have developed faster? So that's why I said peace and stability of the country are very important for the sustainable development in Cambodia. That is the one that the Cambodia have more than I think decade already, that we can maintain our champion on the peace and the stability of the country. The second is because of we are a party of many conventions, especially international convention. So we are not alone. So we are contribute with them, and we get some help from them. We get some support from them, especially for the capacity building, for the technical support from them, and as well as some financial resources. So that is what that we as have the opportunity to develop our country and to conserve our biodiversity as well. And you look at our NBSAP that we already is update in 2016, that still have some activity that are not going to finish. However, all those we are not finished it, but we need to update our NBSAP to align with the post-2020 biodiversity, a global biodiversity framework that's going to be adopted in the COP10, in the COP15 in Kunming. Supposed to be happen in the May 2020 is the pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic is going to be outbreak again in China. So when we adopt the global biodiversity framework, then we will have a lot of opportunity to cooperate with international partner and with private sector, because global biodiversity framework that open not only for biodiversity convention, but for the climate change convention, but for the land degradation convention, for the CITES convention, for the CLMF convention, and for the Ramsar convention. So all of those resources will come and we will work together. We will synergy in the systematic approach. We synergy in terms of the resource, we synergy in terms of the program, and we will join work together with all of collaboration and partner. Then we we may develop and manage our natural resource even faster than we do in the previous time. So this is the good opportunity that we have. Also, if we look at the some achievement that Cambodia contribute to the global so far, look at the red plus. Cambodia is also the champion for the red plus. Look at the percentage of the protected area. We have 14% of the total land area that occupy for the protected area and biodiversity corridor. If we compare this percentage to the global target, achieve target number 11, that said only 10% for the terrestrial as the global that could be achieved by 2020. But right now, Cambodia already almost 3 times exceed the global target already. So on this point, that we have a lot of opportunity, a lot of how can I say a reason that we request and we collaborate with other countries. And if you look at the capacities development and also the research, almost we are just starting establish the Orchid Research Conservation Center in Phnom Penh. But this one is start from the synergy approach that we have it. Right now, if you look at the record of Cambodia, we are the one country among a few countries only in the world that have a very successful in terms of the synergy among the 3 Rio Convention. And Cambodia also invite to be the co-host for the synergies of the 3 Rio Convention, not only in the region, but in the global. So probably on the Substars 24 and for the COP15, we will have the opportunity to share our championship in the global as well. So all of these things is come from our government effort, by with support from all the development partner and private sector that we work together and we cooperate on to get this championship. I think I can one more thing, the last that I want to highlight. Right now we are in the under the leadership from our minister. Cambodia may have our own brand in terms of the green economy. Probably we will have to try to find any strategy or any policy. We develop, not try to find, we develop, but we are under the development of the same of the bird. Probably make all the sector transformative to the green development rather than we Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Agriculture do alone or make alone for the biodiversity conservation. So this term we may have another opportunity under the leadership and the wise vision of our minister and under the peace and stability of the country that we follow from the government that led by the Samdech Majo, our Prime Minister of Cambodia. So this is what that I would like to highlight and would like to show about what is our policy, what we have, what we implement, what is the future of the opportunity for us, and the trend that we're going to go to the future for the biodiversity conservation. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Her Excellency, for your insightful presentation. So by the time limit, I would like to open for the floor discussion. And first of all, I would like to propose the first question to Undp for Mr. Soni. As some local people believe that the conservation could be a negative effects for local livelihoods, as the most rural people who are rely on the forest and their as their main resource for their income. So how the UNDP engage to those local people in the conservation activity?
Okay, thank you for the question. I hope you can hear me okay. Yes. I think this is very important question because we like I highlight about that UNDP is using or ensuring, try to ensure that the policy support need to align with the proper and inclusive nature positive measures, and especially supporting the vulnerable groups in participating, designing the project as well. So let me answer this because before developing a project, UNDP has a process of social safeguard screening as well. So we call it social environmental screening or safeguard standard that we need to look into the different aspects that might affect social, cultural, and natural environments in the design, and have those need to be assessed carefully by the project design group, and then need to approve by project local project appraisal committee as well. So this is during the designing of the project. But when we are designing it practice stage and is the project implemented, and there might be, we are looking at the who are going to benefiting from the project implementation, who are going to be negatively impact from the project implementation, which is very critical. So engaging local community in every process of reviewing the work plan, as well as participating in implementing, for example, like I give you an exact example of COVID affected community, for example. So this need to be done by a number of consultations with local authorities, commune districts, and community representative. And we are targeting, more importantly, the gender aspect as well. In every meeting that we have, at least 50% of women representatives need to be in that meeting. That's one example. And for the COVID economic response activities, we targeted 50% of activity need to be benefited and need to be given to most vulnerable groups or COVID affected groups, or what is called ID poor 1 to ID poor, the most poorest households, and women-headed household, for example. So we target 50%, just exactly. So then they have to identify, the local authority identify themselves, and they're validated by the community people that those pre-selection lists need to be verified and agreed among the community members. And this is have been done in a number of provinces, Postat and Siem Reap as well, and it was successfully implemented. And there was a quality assurance trip, or a commission from jointly implemented by our donor as well, plus the our government policymaker as well, especially representative from the higher level in Ministry of Environment, and the other different units, not from the project implementation unit, but from the quality assurance unit, have to go into on the site to monitor and make sure that this activity is properly implemented, and it's not, nobody is affected from the particular activities. That I give one particular example of that, but I think RED and other aspects have a different RED social safeguard and so on, but the RED team is doing as well. I think I would give some example for this for now, but may allow other question or comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. So I would like to pose the next question. Despite the great effort of WWF and other NGO working to protect the endangered species, and which many species have declined in the recent year. So the involvement of the stakeholder is really important in the protecting the wildlife. So how can WWF ensure that the all stakeholders commit themselves to protect the wildlife and the fishery species. So, Mr. Saintip, you have any comment on this?
Yes, I think as part of the approach, I already highlighted, I think stakeholder participation is critically important in conservation approach, and local community are the key for the success to conservations. Wildlife has been declining, and as you can see, and we are keep losing key species, but a lot of innovative can be created, and the private and public sector engagement are the core in order to ensuring that the wildlife key species are sustained for the futures. As one of the area I consider as the kind of opportunities is Cambodia, as Her Excellency already highlighted. We have the 41 protected area networks, which is under the protection by law, which is a great opportunities. And then we still have relatively connected habitats, and the species are still in the forest, and it has high potential to recover those species. And we do need to protect the habitats, ensuring the habitat are safe haven for this kind of species in order for them to be survive in the future. We have all the data concerning majority of the data about species movement, habitat and species need, their home range, their key resources and food and other things. So scientific information we do have in place. So it's important that in order to recover the species, we need to secure the place whereby wildlife can live and they can breed fast. So key habitat and new innovations for conservation is need to create it. You know, we are currently discuss with the Ministry of Environment also to implement the wildlife recovery zones, where we are focusing on the certain key species that can be protected and dispersed to the landscape. But at the same time, you can see the initiative that I have highlighted in my talk concerning the landscape approach or integrated landscape approach is one of the way forward to ensure these key protected areas and the key wildlife species are protected and their habitat are not fragmented for the future as well. And we know the key threat to the wildlife, right? I highlighted the snaring is one of the key threat, and the forest conversion is one of the another key threat that leading to habitat loss and habitat fragmentations. So if we are together addressing this between the private sectors, public sectors, then we certainly can turn around. And Cambodia, we do have a model, a successful conservation model, like example, we implementing in the Mekong flooded forest landscape concerning the dolphin species, where we could turn around, increase the population of the dolphins over the past 20 years that they are declining. And in 2017, we be able to bend the curve. It means by increasing around 15% of the dolphin population in there. Certainly, it's a conservation model. We have developed it successfully in place. We continue to monitor and address the key threat to the species as well, and as well as other species.
Oh, thank you so much for your response. And by the time limit, I would like to ask for the last question. And for the last question is, what are the recommendations for Cambodia to achieve this biodiversity conservation and sustainable development by preventing the deforestation, destruction of ecosystem, and promote the biodiversity conservation. So I would like to refer this question to Her Excellency.
Thank you very much for the question, but I did not catch the first question of your speak because of the internet have been interrupted several times. If you don't mind, could you please repeat your question again?
So the question is, what are the recommendations for Cambodia to achieve the biodiversity conservation and sustainable development by preventing the deforestation, destruction of ecosystem, and promoting biodiversity conservation? Can you provide one recommendation on this question?
Thank you very much. I think this time. Okay. Can you hear me right now?
It's not clear.
Yes, we can hear
Hello?
you. We can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, maybe her internet connection is not good. So, hello, Her Excellency. I think maybe Her Excellency might refer this question later. So I would like to ask Mr. Sony, do you have any comment on this question?
Thanks. Let me try, because I think it just provides some key intervention that UNDP going to and will continue to support the government partners and other partners as well, including civil society as well. It's the encourage and accelerate the investment in nature and inclusive nature-based solution. I think this is very important because it touches on many aspects in terms of biodiversity conservation outcome and supporting the government to creating more policy that are nature positive towards sustainable financing, as well as the knowledge transfer, like Excellency had mentioned earlier, that it is important for sufficient resource, human resource and financial resource for biodiversity conservation, as well as the landscape. I do agree with the landscape approach as well, but one thing that I need to add is to, refer back to the previous point that I mentioned in terms of ensure the poor and nature-based positive measure in terms of policy intervention. I think there are many opportunities for public financing and realigning the budget, or to make it more efficient, like Excellency touched on this point as well, towards the to closing the gaps of financing for biodiversity conservation. I think the previous assessment, we found that the gap is, for particularly management, is around 12 million, I think, according to the Undp, but per year. So it's huge gaps. And if you look at the expenditure, it's around 2 and 3 million per year. So it's that's need to be closed. We need to close this huge gap, financial gaps, of course, and capacity gap as well. And I will give the floor to Excellency because she's online right now. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Sonny, and thank you, Kamling. Sorry for the internet connection interrupt. I think the internet is very clever. When I finish my speak, it start to interrupt. And also, so lucky, you know, the repeat question of Ms. Liang. The first I did not cut at the beginning, and the last one I did not cut at the end. So I make the combination of these two questions. I can make a guess. I can provide some recommendation for the sustainable development or conservation of ecosystem and biodiversity in Cambodia by saying the first and keep the country safe and stability. The second have to improve the local livelihood. This is very important. When the people have enough food to eat, they have a very healthy, they enjoy with the nature, and then they become contribute to the conservation. Then they will not put a lot of pressure to the biodiversity as well. And last, I think Sonny maybe already talked some, and Mr. Sengtiet already talked some about the approach and also the gap of the financial biodiversity, sustainable biodiversity financing is very important. Using the sustainable biodiversity financing to ensure that the landscape has been well managed, because the landscape provide multi-function and provide a lot of opportunity for the country development to support the local livelihood and to support the ecosystem themselves. So those kind of things that we need to bear in mind and give the priority. That is all of my short recommendation for that.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with that one. I think my recommendation is just before it's too late, before it's fragmentation of the habitat that we have currently. Let's look at the bigger pictures in terms of the special plans versus landscape visioning. So what each province is that who hosts a lot of natural resources, habitats in their provinces, look at the special plan. Investing, developing a long-term visions. What is the next 20 years going to be look like? What the provinces want to see in terms of sustainable development versus the conservation and habitat restoration and other things, right? Come up with the bigger picture, sign it off for that one. It just not for the planning. It needs the implementation of that. Therefore, the investment into the nature protections and it needed, like Her Excellency already highlighted, in terms of looking at the sustainability financing aspect, so that ranger, boot on the ground, law enforcement all implemented the work, the duty in there, protect the key habitat in there. It's very, very important elements of the planning already developed and need to be executed as well. The other important is private sector engagement. As I highlighted earlier, private sector going to play the critical role in the future to shape the landscape, to shape the nature. So their role is critically important as part of the protection. Don't see the natural resources are free, easy access to, but it needs an investment into the protection so that they are the foundation for economic growth in the future. So investment into nature protection is needed. I also highlighted the importance of the element of doing something that before it's too late. There are key species in the forest. Right now, those key species need to be protected from snaring, from hunting, from other harvesting aspects. So those key species that are in the forest now need a strict protection so that they can survive for a long run. So otherwise, when you acted on a strict protection later on, the species may be gone. So it's very important that act it now. And the other last important thing is the livelihood development aspects. So people need access to food, basic need. And therefore, in innovative approach in terms of looking at alternative livelihood, it's critically important that all the partners, including government, private sector, focusing on the livelihood development. It's so important for a local economy and also a national economy aspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your nice response to this question. And I'm really thankful for Excellency, distinguished speaker, for your valuable comment. As we're running out of time, I would like to end our discussion here. And before closing our program, may I invite all our honorable speakers to have a group photo session. Please, I will count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Again, please. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. Excellency, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the end of our webinar. On behalf of AVI, I would like to thank Excellency, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind participation in our webinar today. Wish you all good luck and good health and stay safe from COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
you
very much.
very much.
Bye.
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 Yes.